Good evening, everyone. It is 5:30. We'll call the meeting of the survey committee to order. We have all four commissioners that comprise the survey committee here, so we have a quorum. And thank you to community members that are on the line as well. Bruce, I know you had sent out a tentative agenda.
Right.
I didn't think, pretty much what I said on the email, in terms of solidifying some of that stakeholder question and information is the only thing I had. I don't have any other issues with the agenda.
Okay, great. If you want to allow me to share a screen, I'll pop it up just so we have it in front of us
Let me
momentarily.
make you co-host.
All right. It's not that. Hang on. Interesting how this, for whatever reason, let me.
Are you a host?
Yeah, I'm a host, and I'm trying to share the very document that I'm sharing the agenda, and this document, the framework document, which I also have as a reference, comes up instead. So I'm not sure why that's the case. But I will come back here. Let's see. Let me just review this for everyone sort of orally without pulling the document up, Lisa. So on the agenda, we have an hour meeting. I actually have a hard stop at 6:30. We want to just very quickly look back at any pending items from last week's meeting, take a look at the takeaways. This was one of our action items from prior surveys. Commissioners have been looking at prior ANC surveys of the community, and to take a look again at stakeholder group meetings, consultations, and Lisa, you'd added taking another look, talking again about our discussion guide, how we wish to frame those, and then a new item, which is to do a first look at selected demographic variables. So those are the four items, and it's a relatively tight agenda, so we can jump right in. Also, it might be helpful, of course, for us to acknowledge Susan Geely, one of our consultants, is on. Steve Connors and Anna Dean are also scheduled to join. We'll see if they can make it, but welcome, Susan.
Thanks for coming, Susan.
Thank you. Sorry, let me just unmute and let's see, start my video. Hello.
Hello.
I'll go back
So
on.
Lisa, we had a few items from last week that I know people have been working on. The background that we talked about, that John Higgins was kind enough to draft, and we had comments on that. There were initial conversations around the frequently asked questions statement, and some work I know has been done on that. So we could maybe chat about that briefly and then just slide right into the takeaways from the surveys that I know Commissioners Gosselin and Nash in particular have been looking at.
Okay. Did everyone get a chance to read Higgins' document?
I didn't. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I have to, I need to review that, and
I didn't either.
yeah.
Okay.
I read it and I liked it, but I did want to add one sentence that I did in italics. I'm not sure how it works where you have multiple edits in a chain, but I wanted to add a sentence in which he had said a lot. He had talked gotten right into the problems that people are having with affordable housing too high and blah blah blah. And I wanted to include that that in addition, many residents have expressed support for affordable housing along with the civic core development. So I simply added that sentence.
Yeah.
to make it more balanced.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I haven't read it, but we definitely do not want this to be unbalanced. So
Mhm.
if there's I don't think they're really, well, I'll read it. It shouldn't be a litany of anything. We're trying to keep it at a baseline.
Mhm.
So if there's a litany of opposition in there, I would be not in favor of that.
I thought it read fairly well. I take Jim's point. I think John was trying to be balanced. Of course, John is a balanced guy. So, yeah. A thing that I would add is that many people, when they look at a backgrounder, will want to see what generally where we are, kind of in terms of the process. So we might look at it as a living document that gets updated with additions concerning where things stand at any given moment. Things will change at the next meeting when DMPEG comes, of course, there'll be new information to include. So that was one thing, but perhaps then Lisa and Peter, you can take a look at it and we can come back offline to it.
Yeah.
That
No,
makes sense?
I think that makes sense, Bruce,
Okay.
that your idea, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know either how much we have to dilate on the facts statement, Peter. I don't know if there's anything about that you'd want to add. But we can also go ahead if you do.
So we're just to be clear, because if you mention a living, breathing document of this process, that's really two different things. So this is a one pager, a high level kind of summary to go with the survey.
Right. Yeah. And I think we when you read it, take a look at it from that very perspective, because it does read a little bit about the background that is meant to be brought to date a little bit, Lisa. The survey statement would be, as I think I indicated in some notes, more along the lines of why are we doing the survey? What should you have in mind as you're doing the survey, so that people, when they take it, have that. So again, we can discuss it further.
I mean, Lisa, you and I know the history so well that, I mean, and I think we can abstract from it. John knows it too, and
Yeah.
we can make this neutral. This is that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
not, I mean, I think we ought to move to, I mean, I've also, frankly, I have not looked at where we are on FAQs. I mean, I was sort
I
of,
haven't either.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll carry that forward.
yeah,
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
sorry, I
So do you guys want to move? So we know me and Peter, we got some homework to do on that doc, the FAQs, the glossary. I know Ron Eichner has worked on, there's a lot of stuff that's
Mhm.
being worked on. Peter, if we could get that done definitely before Monday's meeting.
absolutely.
Okay.
That's all fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And do you guys want to move on to the summaries of the surveys that everyone's been reviewing?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
And Lisa, it might be helpful just to recall for folks who haven't been part of the conversation thus far, that we acknowledge, and many people in the community have asked if we acknowledge previous surveys. And of course, we said we do. And so we've taken a look at those to extract what we think are relevant takeaways. That's the immediate context.
Right.
Okay.
And
Who-
what I take that to mean is, what information that we can get from these surveys should we be thinking of as we fashion this next survey? And I'll tell you that, of course, there's no way to know how representative the small area plan survey that I looked at was, but one of my biggest takeaways from that is that if you're looking at this from the point of view of affordable housing, there is a solid majority of people for affordable housing if we also make the improvements and changes to the library and the community center that the community wants. If that happens, then people are on board. And that is really important to me, because if there's any sense that, oh, there is some sort of a trade-off between the one or the other, that could sour some members of the community, the numbers that bring us over the majority from that survey on the whole project. And so I think a big focus of this, of our next survey ought to be trying to figure, and this, we were going to do it anyway, probably, but it's, to me, all the more important. We really want to find out, what do people want in the library, in the community center, and in the green space around it. And how we get that really solid, good information is, I think, difficult, because if you just say, do you want this? Yeah, you want this? Yeah, everyone's going to say, I want everything. So that's going to be a challenge for the professionals, maybe. But to me, that is job one. What do people want there?
Jim, just a methodological note, and we
Yeah.
talked about this a little bit, the small area plan solicitation of input from the community, so as not to call it a survey, because obviously a survey has a different methodology.
Okay.
Was an open request to the community to provide feedback, and some people did. So it's not, as you say, representative, so we can't really extract anything of that sort as input for us to think about. But of course, we can't say that it represents the views of the community, because it wasn't structured as a random sample, right, of the community.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm going to say no survey, any survey we do, even this one, is going to be subject to sampling error questions. we're it's a little bit of blind man's buff, but this is a single data point, and let's get more. But
Right.
that is what this, to me, that is what this data point is saying loud and clear. But another thing I want to say is, it does kind of jive with my intuitive sense of the community here.
So, yeah, that's great. Yep. Yep. Peter, you took a look at the comp plan survey and the community survey.
So let me talk first about, sort of to build off of what Jim was saying, talk first about the community center survey. And when I wrote the one-page summary that I did of it, I thought it really held sort of no real lessons for us immediately, because it was, but the more I've thought about it, and even before what Jim said, the more I thought we really do need to have some questions, and I don't know how to design the questions, but some questions about the community, what people want in a community center, what people want in the library. I mean, the problem
And outside.
And outside.
And outside.
Absolutely, and open space, yes. And the problem that we have in figuring out how to design those questions is illustrated by the 2018 survey. I mean, the list went on, and I mean, it said it was like a 19 question survey, but in fact, there were so many subcategories under it that it was more like 110 question survey. And it ended up that everybody was for everything, right? I mean, and and this is to you, Bruce, and to Susan. I do think it's very important that we find a way to ask about and ask in enough granularity that it's not, do you want a library, you want a really good library or not, what people want in these institutions. But as I said in my write-up, the whole way in which this report and survey came about is that the city put out some money to do basic repairs and updates to the community center, and particularly making it ADA compliant. And the ANC jumped on that and said, look, we've got to do more as long as we're going to do something with the community center. But they were operating within the framework of the existing building, and they ended up the survey ended up operating within the framework of the existing uses. Now, the one thing that they did in this so you ended up with, you know, do you want senior fitness? Do you want the senior 60 club there? Do you want ballet? Do you want fencing? Do you want bridge? Do you want Scrabble? Do you want, you know, the one thing they did that was interesting, and I don't know whether it holds any lessons for us, is that they asked a bunch of questions about what people do elsewhere that they would do at the community center. You know, if there was a fitness class, if there was an exercise room, if there was a gym, they asked sort of what things they would bring back to the Connecticut Avenue corridor if it was offered there. And so in that sense, it was trying to figure out, I mean, the aim seemed to be to try to figure out what your consumer base looked like. Now, again, the problem for us wanting to have a short survey is that this is not a short survey, so that's the. If you want to ask me questions about it, I've got.
Peter, do you have, this is Steve Connor, do you have the length of time, the average length of time for the survey? Is that in the document? I don't have it in front
No,
of
but
me.
I can call Jerry Mallets, who was traveling and is now back. I meant to call him today and didn't, but I can call him and ask him about that. But as I say, Steve, there were you know, people were offered lists of 17 options under one question and, you know, 6 under another. And I mean, even just the demographic stuff, you know, it must have taken a good long time to fill out.
Well,
I
I mean,
just-
I don't think, I was telling some other, I don't think we should preclude the fact that we need to have an accurate survey that gauges what we want to find out. And you know, we need to find out the length, and I can look on that document, see if it's there. I didn't see it at the back of it, but I mean, we don't need to ask about every activity that somebody would like to have at the community center. We need them to kind of weigh in on whether they want a community center there, because the city will obviously be able to program a lot of this activity, right? So, I mean, that's almost a secondary thing that we could always follow up on. But I mean, we do have to kind of look for the basic questions that we need to ask about.
Well, as I said to Lisa when we were as we were getting ready for the last meeting, I think that the very way this survey was structured is evidence of how little faith the community has in DPR programming. It's as if everybody wanted to get square footage in the building because that's the way you lock the program. Whereas I don't think you would have the same problem with the library. I think people trust the library system to do good programming. So, but by the way, Ron has his hand up. So
Yeah. Ron, go on.
You did, Ron.
Ron?
I wasn't, yeah,
Go
am I there now?
Yeah,
I wasn't
Yeah.
involved at all in that survey. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know that it wasn't exactly a survey. It was a programming effort done by an architect, a very accomplished architect, and managed by an architect who was on the ANC at the time. So it's a little different than a survey. And it's an information gathering process that then would go into a design process, and they have their ways of massaging that information. So it's sort of a different process than the survey that we're embarking on here.
Ron, I think that's right. It's a different process, but my understanding is that this was something that was fielded by, and I'm looking at the Appendix C, their survey methodology. This was something fielded by the ANC.
Yeah.
I guess it was not Jerry's. It was Amy Mack and Patrick Williams. But I mean, it was. I don't think this was the architect that.
Wasn't this the architect was Robert Bell, and it was managed by Chris Frombeluti?
No, no, no.
No, to be clear,
Oh,
this was
something
a
else.
survey.
My bad.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
this was a survey, 652 respondents. There was a proper questionnaire developed and so forth and so
Okay.
on. So,
All right, my bad. I thought you were referring to the programming effort that
Yeah,
that Bell did.
But to your point, I mean, this was this was in large measure a programming survey,
Sure.
not a design survey. I mean, it was, you know, do you want, you know, Taekwondo? Do you want, I don't know. Susan?
Susan, yep.
Yeah, just a quick point of clarification. Were the response options limited? You know, to get a sense of what would be most important, rather giving the option to say yes, 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 or no, no, no to everything. Because I think-
Yeah, I mean, they ended up with some sort of ranking, but what was I mean, what's an example of that I mean, you know, but people were for almost, I mean, as for example, whether you or a member of your household has participated in one of 24 programs and activities at the center in the previous year. The highest number of respondents, 87, said senior fitness, but even the lowest numbers were still at huge, really
Mhm.
high numbers. So I mean, it was sort of everybody did everything who answered the survey.
Yeah.
I mean, there are these, just as a substance matter. You hear again, you hear early on about the importance of open space. I mean, 81%, almost 82% of respondents rated it as an important or very important element. And the other thing that I think is striking about just content is you hear early on the importance of parking. 78% of respondents rated it very important or somewhat important. And I could not find any crosstabs here, but in the report, it says that 86% of respondents 65 and older said it was very important. These are sort of just two tidbits from of substance from the report. Look, I mean, we're going to have to work through with you guys who have expertise in this area, how you ask questions that sit at that borderline between programming and design. But if there's a way to do it, to ask questions about uses that people would like to see there, but I don't, because I do think that the intuition to say, if you're doing gym, you're paying $200 a month for a gym over in Tenley, would you, if there were classes here, would you bring it, if on a regular schedule, would you bring it back to the Connecticut Avenue corridor? Is a good idea. I mean, and
Okay.
it's an idea that engages people in.
Peter,
Yeah.
I had one more takeaway from your survey that you wrote up that is a little different from the parking emphasis, but I think that I got something out of it that I think we also ought to try to have somewhere in our survey is transportation. I mean, parking is a piece of that, but I think more broadly, transportation is really important. It was the number one thing people said they love to do in my little, whatever you call it. Walking in the neighborhood is what they love most. And excuse me. And when you put housing in, transportation becomes a big deal.
Yeah, I think.
How are people going to get there?
Yeah, Jim,
And if they drive, traffic and parking or buses or biking or, walking, that's really important. We have to, I don't know how you do that, but we have to include that, I think. I
Yeah,
got that from your survey too.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the comp plan amendment survey. I mean,
Yeah, right. I am.
I was just talking about the
Oh, okay.
the community center one.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Do you want
why
to?
don't we segue to that, Peter? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Peter, what year was this question in the chat? What year is the survey done you're referencing right now?
It was done.
2017.
Yeah, it was done. And it had a. Where did they do the methodology? It was. fielded at the end of 2017, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just point out one other thing about it, which is that they took an awful lot of time developing it. I mean, it was dozens of meetings over a year, which we don't,
Wow.
yeah.
And how long was that in the field, Peter? Was that
Um,
the one where you said it was 17 days or so?
no, that's the other one. It was 18
Okay.
and a half days. No, this one was out for January. Damn it, sorry.
I think it was about a month, guys.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
So, let me turn to the other one. This one, again, you have to take into account, that it was, focused more broadly on the whole Upper Connecticut Avenue corridor and amendments to the comprehensive plan then proposed and drafted by OP. Most, essentially all of them adopted into law now. There are only 3 demographic questions: age, voting precinct as a proxy for location, and length of residence at current location. They then drew on a previous OP survey to offer people 8 categories of neighborhood success, and perhaps not surprisingly, quality of public and private services, police, fire, schools for public, shopping, childcare, restaurants for private were ranked top, and then after that on numbers 3 and 5 were open space, public space, and green space. And of the 8 categories, housing choices throughout DC, including affordable homes for renters, owners, and a range of units meeting community needs, ranked at the bottom of the list. And again, I didn't see any crosstabs, but the report said that there were no significant differences among demographics. And then it offered 17 categories of issues that asking people whether the comp plan amendments should address them. At the very top of the list was pedestrian, bicyclist, and road safety. And again, at the bottom of the list was near the bottom of the list, 13 through 17 were public space landscaping, neighborhood diversity, affordable housing, workforce housing, micro mobility services came in dead last. And in fact, it was the only of the categories that attracted no very important rating. Then it looked at transportation. I would just say as an aside, the report itself noted that the Office of Planning had in the then proposed, now enacted amendments, removed a whole range of infrastructure issues from the planning process. So schools, roads, sewers, water. So it asked, and it removed a lot of the transportation issues. But when the survey asked about transportation, there was the walking and driving ranked first and second of the options that the respondents wanted the amendments to address. And then finally, and sort of most confusingly, the survey asked about 3 types of housing that the comp plan, whether the comp plan should seek to add these kinds of housing: affordable, senior, and workforce. And it looks as if basically people answered yes in equal numbers to all 3. But then under that, it offered 3 types of development, and the questions showed some some willingness, particularly with senior housing for biggish buildings, 6+ story buildings, and some interest in 2 to 3 story building walk-ups for affordable housing. I just say at the bottom, and at the bottom of my little summary that I sent around to you is not necessary for our discussions, but I must say, having been involved in this debate from the start of the small area plan on, it's striking to me how many issues that were basically the authors of this report assumed would be addressed are not being addressed. We have really focused in on this one thing, community center library campus. And there are a variety of issues that look more broadly about development along the avenue that we are just not being discussed right now. It may be the nature of the beast, but and there are a lot of options that, for example, there was it's an assumption that the Housing Production Trust Fund would be available to us. And I think that broadly speaking, it's pretty clear to us now, in part because of the city's budget problems, and in part because we wouldn't rate well as an affluent community, that the likelihood of getting that money is slim. So,
But Peter, that was the one thing I wanted to ask you about. I mean, is that just your guess on that? I mean, the city hasn't confirmed that.
no, the city hasn't. No, but I'll put some money down on the issue, but no, that's my impression. As I say, everything from for our purposes, everything from the bottom under the report section, bottom of page 2 and onto page 3 is just, since I was reading the thing closely, I added that, but it's not relevant to designing a survey, I don't think.
Okay.
So, okay.
So Lisa, we have one other survey that we haven't yet taken a look at, I believe, and that, of course, is the DEMPED survey from February and March, which also asks people about their uses of the community center and the library, current and future, projected, and so forth. So that's something we'll want to come back to. The one thing that I would underscore on what Peter has just reported is that this survey for the proposed revisions to the comp plan, as he indicated, does ask fairly specific questions about people's preferences as to the size or the height of buildings for these different types of proposed housing, affordable, senior, and workforce. So there is information there, and generally speaking, as many people in the public know, this survey showed very little support for a building over 6 stories. I think it was 7 to 9% only of people showed support for that across these 3 categories. So just something for us to have in mind.
It's not representative, though.
No, I'm just reporting what the survey. I'm just reporting what the survey said. Now we have to take into account what the survey is about. If we're looking at what's in these documents right now, such as we
I
have.
know. I'm just making fun of you because of the comment you made when Jim reported on the other side of the issue. Works both ways.
But I wasn't.
Can I just add one more thing before we get into that? The other thing, and somebody already pointed it out. The thing that fascinated me about this survey in terms of just execution, it is that it was out for only 18.5 days in December. In the deep of December, it got this much response. And the other thing, and Jim noticed, is that it got a large response from prime age.
Yes.
And that's interesting because the earlier survey, again, this is just execution stuff that maybe you, Bruce, and Steve and Susan will understand better, but the community center survey was really barbell. It was young and old, and it was like the respondents were, whereas this one seemed to get your 35 to 45 or 35 or 54 or whatever.
And it was mainly done electronically, right?
It was done entirely
media.
electronically.
It was exclusively electronic, yeah.
And in fact, the other one was done electronically too. They had a printed copy, but they said nobody used it.
Right.
Okay. Ron?
Thanks, guys. as somebody who was deeply involved in that comp plan task force, and I had a problem with Jerry's survey then, and I still have it in that there was no education explanation component to it. And basically it asked the question, which is the question that I'm worried that some version of that could happen with this survey. It basically asks the question, do you want more density or less density?
Yeah.
All right, if that's what the survey is, it's going to get ignored by the people downtown. That's not a question. You need to flesh that out and talk about other goals and how they're affected by choices you make. And I've been arguing with Jerry about that survey since it was done, but that's my 2 cents.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'd say on the flip side, if we don't ask a version of, and I understand that this is where the art of all this comes. If we don't ask a straightforward version of what do you want, you know, what's most important to you, that's not going to be taken seriously here.
I understand that. And I also think that just because affordable housing was on that survey down at like 9% or 17% or something, compared to, 80% people worried about where they're going to park their car, that doesn't mean that that affordable housing isn't important. It just means that people's creature comforts come first.
Yep.
And we need to somehow figure out how to deal with that in the survey also.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
my sense
sure
too.
that's right.
Lisa, just minding the time here, I'm helping on that because we've got various other items we want to get to. I know it's at 6:06.
Yep, let's move.
Unless just being open about this, if the other members of the community had anything they wanted to add to the conversation, I don't mean to foreclose it. If not, we can move on to the next item, which was, again, taking a look at the stakeholder engagement that we've had in mind to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wrote down some groups. I will put those in the chat. Oh my goodness, if I can get them copied. Oh, thank you. I think this is going to be the easy part. I think where we really need to spend our time is the structure.
Right.
If you guys want to take a look at the chat, we can add. If there's any group I'm missing.
Lisa, in your mind, what are the criteria for the groups?
In terms of who the actual person within that group?
No, just the group itself.
Oh, so these are groups that have been actively kind of participating in this topic kind of since day one.
Mhm.
So they've reached out to the ANC. They've submitted, proposals to the ANC. And then, the ones from Chevy Chase, obviously that speaks for itself. They're local here. When has been pretty active on this topic. Northwest Neighbors, what's that?
Northwest.
What's Meg's? No, it's not
that's Opportunity Partner.
Yeah, Northwest Opportunities Partner submitted a proposal to us, as well as Win and Ward 3 Vision. So it's basically groups that have been pretty much involved. You know what? I saw that, Ron. I thought about Chevy Chase Main Street as well. It's interesting you said that. So there are people that, have been engaged on this issue pretty much for a long time, not just this year. They've been involved in this for a long time.
I know this is, gonna cause some problem, but can I suggest that we also add some individuals? I mean, Mary Rouse has certainly played a role in this debate. Andrea Rosen,
Mhm.
Gary Mallets. I just think that, I mean, they're very influential, and they've in the community, and they've had a lot to say on this.
Well, I have some, the only thing I will say about that is if we're going to do that, then we're going to put influential individuals on the opposite side of the argument. We're
Yes,
going to have and I'm really not.
Well,
I would
aren't those
say
other people on the list that are on that list already?
I'm really just kind of opposed to the individual people with, any perspective one way or the other. I put individuals that live immediately adjacent to that property. So McKinley and Northampton neighbors, which I've said from day one, I would like to hear from. But I think we have to be very careful on any side of the subject when we're saying the loudest voices are influential. Because there are many people in this community that have influence on this topic that they're not vocal. They're not coming to these meetings. They're not showing up at the ANC. They're not putting things in the chat on the listserv. They're observing. But we don't know who they are necessarily in every corner of our ANC. But to deem those voices as the influential voices, I'm not for that at all.
Nor am I.
I think that's a mistake, but okay. I mean, I understand the issue of balance, that's fine. But I do think that speaking to people who are influential is important. I mean,
Yeah, but I think that bears influential to who? And to what purpose? I mean,
Express their
I'm
opinion.
not going to disparage anybody. But I think there's a lot of viewpoint on who people view as influential.
Can I ask the question about, and we have this as part of our solicitation of public input that we will be getting out to the community, providing a means for individuals to provide us with detailed input. Would that, Peter, satisfy what you have in mind, or do you think a face-to-face interview is required in addition?
fine. I mean, we can ask for, just ask for input stuff is fine.
And it doesn't stop individual commissioners from, and we've talked about this as a commission before, to reaching out to stakeholders or people in the community that you personally want to touch. Maybe you personally want to touch the people that were mentioned. That's fine. I would like to personally touch Corinthia Simmons, people on the opposite side of that argument. But I think we can do that individually as a commission without, as a commission, saying you all are the influential voices. I think that's very dangerous on any topic.
But I thought we were talking about the how the different ANC districts were going to be reps were going to be talking to people. Is this like a master list?
No, this is stakeholder interviews that the survey committee
And these are anonymous, right? Anyway, I thought
what's anonymous?
I thought you said that people weren't going to be putting names to their responses. So what does it matter?
No, we didn't say that.
Oh, I could be
We
wrong.
talked the last meeting, we talked about recording or not. But these are people that we're going to reach out to and invite to be interviewed about the survey.
Okay, because normally in qualitative research, and Susan, you can weigh in, but you would just say that it was a male or female, age, retired, non-retired, what they do for a living. That's standard in qualitative research. I mean, there would be no names attached. It would just be more input. So I guess I'm a little confused.
Well, the thing that I'm talking about, Steve, is that the input is balanced. The people.
Sure. Oh yeah. No, there's a reason for that. I
Okay,
totally agree.
right. So, and to
Yeah, yeah.
get away from that and to not just, and they were primed as influential people. I don't think the ANC wants to get into that.
Steve, I think you understand we're not talking about the survey. We're talking about sort of
Yeah, the pre-work. Yeah, yeah.
pre-work. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we're clearly the survey is going to be anonymous.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it's hearing from various quarters about their views of what should be in the survey.
Mhm.
Yeah, and let me just address this comment from Harry Barnes. I'm not sure why we're putting, and I don't want to do this. You know, I mentioned Corinthia, and now there's a comment in the chat about her being a GS-14 with a government job. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Harry. So what? No, she doesn't have any more special standing than Mary Rouse, than Andrea Rosen, or anybody else. And it's that type of comment exactly why I say we don't need to go down this path.
Lisa, just a general comment. We can move on from here. I think we can take this on.
My goodness.
We can take this on board and come back and discuss it among commissioners. I just think what we want to be able to demonstrate to the community is that obviously in all of our outreach, that we of course are balanced, as you suggested, that we include all relevant organizations. We hear from a multitude of voices, and we do all our level best to ensure that. I think that's what we're trying to get at.
Well, and as I did, I put those in the chat. And if any commissioners or any community members have organizations that are not in the listing that should be added to the listing, let's talk about that as opposed to talk about individuals. And my suggestion to touch individuals that are most impacted, regardless of where they sit on the subject, are those that live right adjacent to the property. So I think if we do that, we'll capture pretty much a good balance of who we need to talk to. I want to go to community, Cal, then Michelle Wolin.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. So I'm really not clear on this use of the term stakeholders. It sounds like most of the groups you put on this list are not stakeholders at all, but they're influencers, they're advocacy groups, they're self-organized groups of people in the neighborhood. Stakeholder groups, in the traditional sense, are folks like people of color, older folks, women, children. They're segments of the community that are directly impacted by what happens. And they're not self-organized like that in the same way. So I think these are more influencer groups than they are stakeholder groups, and I would object to the term stakeholders being used when it's not about their stake.
What would you call them, Cal?
I'd call them influencers or advocacy groups or something like that. And you said many of these groups have been involved for a long time since the beginning, but at least one of these groups was only formed within the last few weeks. So
right, but they're local. I mean, and I know who you're referencing.
Yeah.
I mean, but that was formed for Chevy Chase citizens. They're a local group.
Yeah. So the Northampton and McKinley neighbors, clearly, this is going to have a direct impact on them. So that qualifies, in my view, for them to be a stakeholder because they have something at stake here. The rest of the groups, I don't feel that way about. So influencers or advocacy groups or something like that.
Okay. Michelle?
Yeah, I wrote something in the chat, which sort of sums up my comments about this. This is repeating the same mistake as the Community Advisory Council for the Small Area Plan, which is what you're doing is heavily tilting it towards people who are of one point of view, who very much want to see development here for whatever reason, and who, I have to add, have been involved in this from the very beginning and have had an outsized influence on this whole process at the expense of your ordinary resident in the community who didn't even know all this was happening way back when groups like Ward 3 Vision and WIN were actively lobbying and getting the ANC chair on their side and pushing this through. And I hate to see that yet again, we're going to give outsized influence to these groups. I mean, we know how they're going to view the survey. I mean, why even ask? And historic Chevy Chase, led by Carl Lankowski, we know exactly what his views are. We already know this. So I just hope you realize the group that's been missing all along is the entire community, not these organized groups. It's the people that live here. And I know that's who the survey will reach, I hope. But, you know, I would say let your professionals, and hopefully you all will be fair in the survey. But, you know, I mean, this group is already, you know, it's already outnumbered. I mean, other than the Northampton people and McKinley people, maybe that will help balance it out. Like I said, I think the CAC, the small area plan, was a real disservice to the community, as in regular people that live here, because these groups are pushing a certain agenda. So that's it.
Thank you. And I mean, commissioners, we can edit the list to however we like. I mean, we don't have to go with the list or not. I mean, that's what we're here discussing.
And why don't we take this input and then have a conversation about that? Take it on board for now. I think we've got some good input.
Well, where and when are we going to have the conversation? I mean, this is just my opinion, commissioners. This is not hard. This is not a heavy lift. We're picking who we want to talk to pre-survey. We've had great comments by Cal, great comments by equally Michelle. So I think that we could probably come up with, you know, a list that we could send to the rest of the commission to get them to weigh off on. But it seems like, you know, there's some good suggestions that we should adjust what we have here.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I mean, basically.
So we got about 10 minutes. What do you guys feel about this list?
I mean, I think that if we're going to have a list of stakeholder organizations, that they should be balanced. And just this list, the problem is with it that we suspect that some of the adjacent neighbors are going to have concerns, but they're not organized in a way that you know, WIN, which has a proposal, or Ward 3 Vision, which has a proposal. So I just to the question of balance, I do think that Michelle is right, that we want to be sure and look, and all we're doing here is we're trying to test drive our approach here. I mean,
Yeah.
so
how would you modify the list, Peter? I mean, that's all I'm looking for. I'm just looking for what's going to be the output. How would you modify the list? Do you want to strike WIN and Ward 3 Vision? I don't have a problem with that.
I do.
Well, hang on a minute. I'm still dealing with Commissioner Gosling. I don't. I mean, I really don't. And you said it right. This process is going into our survey. Ward 3 Vision, WIN, just like Michelle has said, they've done an interview process with the small area plan, and they've also done with a process, I believe, with DMPED on our RFP. I had my interview today, and I know they're on the list for that. So I don't have a problem with this being more community focused at all.
you don't have a problem with it being.
No,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
no.
So then the question becomes, Lisa, if in fact another process would serve us well, whereby we take input, we solicit input from any member of the community, any group in the community that wishes to provide input for this process as we shape the survey design and the questionnaire. We had thought it might be helpful to reach out to different community organizations, whether we call them influencers or stakeholders. And if that is not a wise approach, as we're hearing some feedback on potentially, we can go a different route in terms of how we do this.
Well, I think that's a.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Bruce. I guess my only concern is our bandwidth and how in the world do we navigate that? Because and maybe what I'm envisioning is off, but I'm just thinking of something that would have to be open to everybody, that we have to distribute to everybody. And then we get that input in. We have to analyze that input. We have to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
How do we handle that?
it's a good question. I'll tell you what, let me propose that we table this for now, only because I would like to at least present to the group the demographic variables so people can begin thinking about those for next time. Is that okay? And then we'll come back and we can put this on for further discussion. Obviously, there's a lot more here to chew on, I think.
Okay.
Okay. So that being the case, I know we have hands raised still.
Yeah.
Michelle and Ron wanted to come into the conversation.
Okay, they took their hands down. Ron, you still want to talk?
Yeah, I would just add one thing. I think Peter is, I'm actually fairly much in agreement with Peter. I think that a few of the perennial loud voices on the listserv might be treated as stakeholders for the purpose of this discussion that you're talking about. And I politically, it may be problematic to pick individuals. You guys have to work that out, but I think balancing out a little bit that way is not unreasonable. I would actually have more problem taking groups like Ward 3 Vision and WIN out of that discussion, because we have been so deeply involved and involved with substance all along. And so the people who have been opposed, this is an opportunity for them to have an input into the substance of thing, and it would be okay, fine with me.
Susan?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to remind us of what we touched upon last time. It's not just who we're talking to for the community input, but how we're getting that input, right? So, and I think just as listening to this conversation, that has to be managed quite, managed process so that you're not overwhelmed. Like, this is not a chance for everybody just to opine on everything. It's really very focused on the survey and some kind of short deck or summary of what we already know from previous surveys as a launching point, into that this is what we know, this is where the gaps are, this is what we think the areas, not the specific questions. This is where we think we're going, this is the line of questioning we imagine. What else should we be asking? Just managing that process so it isn't a free-for-all.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Susan, that you were saying, and I wonder, should we develop a list of questions that we want to ask all the stakeholders?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about on email.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it's trying to do that.
Maybe should we get to work on that now?
We can. I don't know if we're there yet, and I know Bruce wants to get to the demographics. So
Okay, all right.
let's let Bruce do demographics, and then we.
No. We may not have time even now, Lisa. It's 6:28. If you do look in the chat, but anyway, just to close the loop on that, we're going to take all this on board and come back and talk about a process to solicit community input, whether it's interviews as we were discussing, or whether we have another process. But I think we're hearing good input here. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. In the chat, I put a list of demographic variables, and let me just explain, since we've got very little time. Folks can copy this, take this on board. The recording will have it in the chat. I had some time on the weekend with our consultants, Susan, Steve, and Anna, just to try to tease out and looking at the prior surveys.
What?
Looking at the prior surveys, it was Michelle, looking at the prior surveys that included selected demographic variables up front. So we had a conversation, and we just put down for a starting place in the discussion And then I shared that with you and Lisa, you raised an important point, which is demographic variable of race to include. So we have the 9 now that are not necessarily 9 that we want to use. They're just there for folks to take a look at and for us to have further conversation around. So I just wanted to get it out to the community so you would see these and you could then be thinking about these, and the next meeting we can come back to them.
Sounds good. Okay.
Mm.
Anything else? We got no time left.
Ding.
Michelle will give you the last word.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. And sorry for that little cry of, oh no, because I was putting very important things in the chat and I realized they were just going to Cal. So this has happened to me before. So since you're closing it up, oh man, all my messages went to Cal. Is there some way you guys can see them?
Hey,
I think
Michelle,
so, Michelle. When we
Michelle.
do the chat, I believe it also shows it doesn't, Cal?
no,
Well,
I
I've
will-
seen it
right
show
now, if
direct
you
messages.
Send
if you
them
leave
to.
it- if
Yeah,
you leave it
Cal,
on-
can you just take a few minutes to copy them out
Yeah,
and put them?
that's what I was gonna suggest. Let me
Yeah,
copy
I-
and repost them for you.
I
Uh,
tried to shade it and copy it and I couldn't. So if you know how to do it, please do. There's
Oh,
like
wait a
3 of
minute,
them.
that's right. Did you fix that? Yeah, I can't copy out of the chat, Lisa. Did you fix that yet? Remember I
So-
talked about that last week?
Well, would you like me to read them?
Yes. Can you read them?
A little bedtime reading before the close of the. Okay, I'll read you a story. So my first message was, but there aren't enough organized in, groups on the other side, the non-development side. Frankly, there isn't much point in talking to the organized groups. You know where they stand. Talking to the neighbors along the street is important because I can tell you that they have felt completely ignored. And then later on, I couldn't just be quiet. I continued on. And then later I said, why can't you develop a survey with your professionals without having these organized groups influencing it? And then finally, I said, calling people like Andrea, Mary, etc., the loudest voices is somewhat disingenuous because they had no voice early on, despite trying. People like them weren't included in the CAC. The only voice, when all this was being hatched, the only voices early on were Ward 3 Vision and Win, with the support of the former ANC chair. This has been the problem all along with this process. Okay, that's it.
That's great. I'm glad you read that out. That gives us a lot to think about. Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate that.
Okay, our next meeting is back to 7.
Yes, so everybody, our next meeting next Tuesday, back at 7. Remember, we only meet at 5:30 when it's the same day of another ANC committee meeting, which is the rates committee.
And I'll do an announcement for public dissemination about next week's meeting, just so we broaden the news about the committee's meeting. So,
Okay, this was a
Okay.
great meeting. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
thank
Good
you.
night.
Okay,
Thank
good
you.
night, y'all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.